You ever seen a boy with a question too big for the world he was born into, 12 years old, pencil in hand, shoes scuffed from walking to school and back every day? That was Elijah Green, Birmingham, Alabama, 1960-8. He wasn't loud. He wasn't reckless. He just asked things. Why can't we go through the front of the library? That was the one that broke the sky. Welcome to Injustice BROWEN. I'm Mark Joie. If this story moves you even a little, hit that subscribe button. Share your thoughts in the comments. These stories aren't history, they're memory. And memory has teeth. Elijah was a curious kid, not the kind who needed attention. He just needed truth. His mother, Loretta, sang every Sunday morning in the second pew from the front. She said her voice was a prayer that never got tired. His father, John, swept the floors of the Jefferson County Courthouse 6 nights a week, never missed a shift. Said dignity didn't depend on who signed your paycheck. Elijah liked to stay late after school, reading in the back of the colored section of the public library, dusty encyclopedias, math puzzles, books about stars and machines and how they worked. It didn't make sense to him. Separate doors, separate seats, the same books, but different rules. One Tuesday, he asked it out loud. Why do we gotta use the back door when the front one's right there? The librarian looked up from her desk. A white man standing nearby paused. Didn't say nothing. Just paused. Looked at Elijah like he wasn't supposed to speak, like a question itself could be dangerous. That was the first crack. Elijah didn't know it then, but the man worked across the street. County clerk's office. Had just enough power and just enough hate to do something awful and make it stick. 2 days later, John Green came home late, blood on his shirt, limp in his left leg, wouldn't speak, wouldn't eat, wouldn't even meet his wife's eyes. They said he stole a radio from one of the courthouse offices. Said they had reasonable suspicion, but there was no radio, no proof, just bruises, just silence. They dragged him down the stairs before anyone could stop it. Elijah sat in the hallway, clutching his father's belt in his hands, not understanding why the world had flipped over so fast. A boy that young don't know what to do with silence. He kept asking, "What did Daddy do?" over and over. Loretta didn't answer. She just sat at the kitchen table with her head in her hands, her voice quiet like it had sunk into the floor. That night, Elijah didn't sleep. He stared at the ceiling and tried to work it out. Like a puzzle, what piece did his father touch that made everything fall apart? Next morning, he walked past the library and didn't even glance at the door. He didn't ask questions anymore. There's something about that first betrayal. The first time the world tells you, you don't belong here. Not really, it changes. The way your feet touch the ground. Elijah stopped speaking up in class. His notebooks went blank. He still showed up every day, still tucked in his shirt like his father taught him. Still said yes ma'am and no sir. But the spark, that shine that made teachers lean in when he talked, it was gone. And the man who had paused in the library, he never faced a thing, no consequence, not a scratch. The courthouse kept its floors clean. John never worked again. His leg never healed right. The pain got worse in the winter. And Elijah, he just kept getting older, quieter, sharper, like a blade cooling in the dark. People say kids are resilient, but what they really mean is they don't have a choice. What happened to Elijah Green didn't make the news. There were no protests, no front page outrage, just another quiet wound, stitched into a quiet family, the kind of story that vanishes unless someone bothers to carry it. But that boy became a man, and the world wasn't ready for what he carried with him, because sometimes the most dangerous person is the one who remembers, and Elijah remembered everything. By the time Elijah turned 16, his voice had shrunk to a whisper, not because he was shy, not because he didn't have things to say, but because the world had taught him loud black boys don't get warnings, they get buried. The house stayed quiet. His father never spoke of the night they took him down those courthouse stairs. Not once. He just sat in his chair by the window with a cane resting beside him and a Bible that stayed closed. Sometimes his leg would twitch like it remembered the pain before his mind did. When Elijah asked if it still hurt, John would just shake his head. He never lied, but he wasn't about to tell the truth either. His mother kept singing, but only in the kitchen now. Her hymns got softer. She still hit every note, but none of them smiled anymore. Elijah learned not to touch doors without knocking first. Learned not to make sudden movements in stores. Learn how to look a white man in the eye just long enough to be polite, but not long enough to be called a problem. That's how you made it home at night. He still got good grades. Better than good, near perfect. Teacher said he had a mind like a steel trap, could remember anything he read, quote whole passages from memory, but he never raised his hand, never questioned the textbook. The day he applied for a college scholarship, his guidance counselor smiled too much, kept touching papers that didn't need touching, said she put in a strong recommendation. But weeks passed, nothing came back, no call, no letter, just a quiet rejection and a single sentence on the form. Disciplinary mark, verbal, aggression. Elijah had never been in a fight, never raised his voice in that school, not once. But that word aggression was a sentence without trial. He never got an explanation, just silence. That same cold silence his father had been living in for years. So he took a job at the steel factory off Highway 11, night shift, welding, sorting, cleaning, the kind of job that eats your back before it feeds your belly. He didn't complain, didn't protest, just clocked in, kept his head down, and paid the light bill. Sometimes, on his break, he'd sit under the yellow buzz of a flickering lamp outside the loading dock in red court cases, old ones, Brown v. Board, Loving v. Virginia, Plessy v. Ferguson. He didn't know why, just knew it made the silence feel less heavy when he understood the rules behind it. There was a girl once, Naomi. She worked at the diner down the road. Sweet voice, sharper than she looked. They used to sit under the trees and talk about leaving Alabama someday. But she left before he did, moved to Chicago, sent one postcard, never came back. Elijah kept it folded in his wallet like a story that almost happened. Years passed. The pain dulled, but it never left. He watched boys his age join the army, buy cars, start businesses. He just worked, quietly, carefully. The fire inside him never burned bright after that scholarship, but it didn't go out either. It just sat in his chest, low and hot, waiting. Some people live loud, others survive by silence. Elijah Green did both, just not at the same time. He wasn't trying to change the world anymore. He was just trying to make it through it. But sometimes, even, the quiet ones reach a point where the world stops letting them pass unnoticed. And for Elijah, that day was coming. The call came at 2:17 in the morning. Elijah was still in his work clothes, boots unlaced, sitting on the edge of the couch when the phone rang. His sister's voice didn't even sound like hers. She just said, "They beat him, Elijah. They beat my baby." Isaiah was 18, tall, quiet, still figuring himself out, a little wild with his clothes, always wore that same red cap backward, like it gave him power. He wanted to study music, said he was gonna make beats for big names one day, but that night, he was driving home from a friend's birthday. Just a borrowed car, taillight out. That's all it took. The white officers pulled him over in the suburb outside Birmingham. Didn't like the way he looked, said he mouthed off, said he resisted. The coroner's report would later say otherwise. For broken ribs, a cracked orbital socket, brain swelling from blunt force trauma. They left him in the street while they called for backup, not an ambulance, backup. By the time help came, Isaiah was unconscious. By the time Elijah saw him, he didn't look like Isaiah anymore. Tubes down his throat, head wrapped in gauze, eyes that didn't blink. Elijah stood there, fists shaking, heart pounding in that cold hospital hallway, and something snapped. He walked into that police station the next morning like a man with nothing left to lose. Demanded names, demanded reports. The woman at the front desk wouldn't even look up. A sergeant came out, told him to lower his voice, said if he didn't leave, he'd be arrested for disruption. Like Isaiah hadn't just been beaten half to death in their uniforms. Elijah's voice shook when he said it. "You're gonna pay for this, one way or another." They told him to get a lawyer if he had something to prove. He tried, went to 6 law firms in 3 days. One told him there wasn't enough evidence. Another said they were booked solid. The last one said it was a bad idea to go after public servants. That's what they called them, public servants. Isaiah couldn't talk, could barely move. His mother cried in the bathroom every time someone visited. His younger cousins stared at the floor like they were afraid to breathe too loud. The family stopped having Sunday dinners. The house stopped smelling like food. Elijah's silence, his old armor, had started to rot from the inside. He couldn't sleep, couldn't eat. The rage was a second heartbeat. Then came the news report. Channel 6, 7 minutes long. A calm, white anchorwoman saying Isaiah Green was known to police, that he had a history of behavioral incidents in school, that the officers involved acted within protocol. They showed his mugshot from 2 years ago when he'd skipped class and gotten caught shoplifting a candy bar. They didn't show his hospital bed. They didn't show his mother shaking hands or the part of his skull they had to shave to relieve pressure. They didn't show the truth. Elijah watched it all in dead silence. Then, without saying a word, he walked to the back room, pulled out every newspaper in the house, every clipping with Isaiah's name, every local piece of trash that called him troubled or unstable. He took them to the backyard and lit a match. The fire climbed slow at first, then roared like it had something to say. He stood there and watched it burn, the orange glow licking at the night sky, the pages curling and crumbling like the lies they were printed on. For the first time in years, Elijah didn't feel tired. He felt awake. This wasn't about questions anymore. It wasn't about survival. That part of him, the part that kept his head down and followed the rules, was already gone. What they did to Isaiah, that was blood on their hands. But from here on out, whatever came next, it would be on his. And Elijah Green was done waiting for someone else to do what had to be done. He may not have had a badge. He may not have had a courtroom. But he had memory. He had rage. And he had nothing left to lose. And for the first time since he was 12 years old, he wasn't afraid of what his voice could do. They thought the fire would fade, that it would burn fast and then die out like it always had for others, for folks who didn't know how to carry it. But Elijah Green, he held on. No cameras came. No politicians showed up. No lawsuits were won. But in that silence, Elijah built something the world didn't see coming. He started with a library card, not the public one, the law library over on Jefferson, the same courthouse where they dragged his father down the stairs like a piece of garbage. Elijah walked in there with a notebook and a chip on his shoulder. He didn't ask for help, didn't say much at all, just read every single day. Case law, civil rights statutes, police misconduct filings, housing code violations, anything with weight, anything with sharp edges. He took notes like a man memorizing enemy movements. At first, it was just for Isaiah, trying to understand what went wrong, what loopholes let it happen. But as the weeks turned into months, Elijah realized this wasn't just about one boy, it was about all of them. All the neighbors getting kicked out for being 2 days late on rent, all the grandmothers fined for weeds in their yard, all the boys arrested because their eyes were too direct, their voices too confident. Elijah started helping folks one at a time, quietly, no titles, no business card. Just truth. He'd show up at someone's house with a copy of the law folded in his pocket and say, "Don't sign that. Not yet." He'd write letters to landlords quoting statutes they never expected a factory worker to understand. He'd stand outside small claims court, whispering advice to a mother fighting to keep her lights on. He wasn't looking to be a hero. He was just tired of watching people lose when they didn't have to, and word got around. People started calling him the man with the books. Ask Elijah. He'll know what to do. He had no degree, no badge, no office, just a kitchen table stacked with folders, and a reputation strong enough to make folks sit up straight. One day, a local judge, black man, maybe a few years younger, stopped Elijah in the hallway, said, "I've been hearing about you. Heard. You know your stuff." Elijah didn't say much, just nodded. The judge invited him to sit in on hearings, said the courtroom could use more eyes like his, not lawyers, not officials, just watchers, people who understood when something wasn't right and weren't too scared to say it. Elijah started going once a week, sat in the back row, no expression, just a notebook in his lap and eyes that missed nothing. It didn't make the news, didn't change the world overnight, but slowly people started pushing back. Renters started winning small claims. Cops stopped knocking on certain doors just to scare folks. A young teacher won an appeal after being unfairly suspended. Thanks to a packet Elijah helped her write typed on his old clunky typewriter. Every letter uneven, but every word exact. He couldn't undo what happened to Isaiah, couldn't reverse the limp in his father's step or the sound of his mother humming through tears. But he could carve space, make room for others to breathe, and he did. Every letter he wrote was a refusal. Every legal code he studied was a brick in a wall. The system wasn't ready for. They didn't know what to do with a man who never raised his voice, but never backed down either. Elijah had no office, just a folding chair and a beat-up desk in the corner of his living room. But that desk changed more lives than a dozen courtrooms, and the fire, it never dimmed. It burned low, sure, quiet, controlled, but it burned. Because once a man learns that silence is death, he doesn't go back. He fights with whatever tools he's got. Words, laws, truth. Elijah Green never wore a robe, never passed a bar exam, but in that town, he was justice. And the ones who thought they could break him, they were still trying to figure out when exactly the tables turned. Because they hadn't just tried to silence a man, they tried to silence a memory. And memories, when sharpened right, cut deeper than any badge ever could. Elijah Green passed away on a rainy Thursday in 2019. No headlines, no breaking news, just a line in the local obituary column that read, Elijah J. Green, 63, factory worker, community volunteer, survived by family. That's all they wrote. But that's not all he was. They held the service at St. Luke's Baptist, same church where his mother used to sing, wooden pews, stained glass windows faded from years of Alabama sun, and a sanctuary full of people more than anyone expected. Some came in suits, some had work boots. One man showed up with eviction papers in his hand, said Elijah helped him keep his house when no one else would touch the case. Another woman stood up and said, I wouldn't have my job right now if it weren't for Mr. Green. He wrote a letter that made them listen. Story after story poured out. A teenager Elijah had mentored when no one else cared. A grandmother whose son had been jailed without cause, until Elijah helped her draft the right motion. A young black officer who said Elijah was the reason he stayed on the right side of the badge. No preacher could have preached a better sermon than those stories did. Then his niece stepped forward, wore a navy blue dress, simple, clean, with tears in her voice, but fire in her spine. Said she had something Elijah wanted her to read if he didn't make it past the summer. She unfolded the letter with hands that trembled and started reading. Slow. If you're hearing this, then I guess I finally sat down long enough to rest. I didn't live perfect, didn't live loud, but I lived real, and I want you to know, I wasn't trying to change the world. I just wanted to make it hurt less for the ones who came after me. I was never brave. I was just tired of being scared. And if anything I did helped even one of y'all stand taller or speak louder, then it was worth it. Don't put me on no pedestal. Just keep pushing, keep fighting smart, and keep telling the truth, even when nobody's listening. That's how we win. Silence took the room when she finished. Not sadness, not yet, just wait, heavy, full. True. Later that year, the city announced they'd approved a mural, not on some alley wall or a school nobody walked past. They painted it on the side of the courthouse. The same courthouse where his father's blood dried on cold stairs. The same courthouse where Elijah had once been told to leave, to be quiet, to stay in his place. They painted him tall, chin up, eyes forward, books in his hand. And right behind him, the front door of the building, the one he was never allowed to use as a boy. Now, he watches it forever. Every judge, every clerk, every officer walking in and out. Elijah Green is the first thing they see. No title, no plaque, just a name they couldn't erase. And the ones who knew him, who saw him move through a world set against him, they don't need monuments to remember. They just tell the stories, because legacy isn't carved in stone. It lives in the people you lift when nobody else would. And Elijah lifted a whole town quietly, stubbornly, completely. They tried to break him, tried to forget him, but you can't forget a man who never let go of the truth. And Elijah, he made sure the truth outlived him. Most people don't know Elijah Green's name. It's not in the textbooks. There's no holiday, no biography on a shelf, just a mural on a courthouse wall and a town that still speaks his name in quiet corners. But if you listen close, you can still hear him, in the way a landlord stutters when a tenant knows they're rights, in the calm of a mother walking out of court with her dignity intact, in the silence that used to cover up injustice but doesn't anymore. He never asked for recognition. He didn't chase titles. He just left behind a paper trail of courage, handwritten notes, court references, names of people he helped scribbled in the margins of old library books. A few months ago, a young law student black girl, maybe 22, was volunteering at the community center when she found a dusty cardboard box near the back. Inside, She found Elijah's notes, dozens of pages, folded and worn, still marked with his precise, slanted handwriting. She didn't even know who he was at first, but when she read what he'd written, arguments against illegal searches, letters challenging police records, outlines of civil cases that never made the news, she stopped everything. She sat there, in that back room, alone with those pages, and read them like scripture. And when she walked out, she walked differently. That's what legacy really is, not fame, not speeches, but footsteps left deep enough for someone else to follow. Elijah's gone, but the silence he broke, it's still breaking, still splintering under the weight of truth. Because when one person speaks, another listens, and when enough of us listen, the light can't hold. The fight isn't over. There are still names being buried, still mothers losing sleep, still boys asking questions that turn them into targets. But now, more of us know what to say back. Now, more of us refuse to be quiet. That's Elijah Green's echo. Not loud, not showy, but constant. And if you've heard this story, if you felt something when you did then, his echo lives in you now, too. This is Injustice BROWEN. I'm Mark Joie. And if this story meant something to you, share it, speak it, carry it, because the truth, it doesn't fade. It waits for someone strong enough to keep telling it.